start or? Yeah, you good? Awesome. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our session. You know, there's lots of competition out there. But I think this is going to be a good one. So we wanted to come up with something which we felt was really quite an important topic. And it's something which a number of patent attorneys particularly that are dealing with, especially the universities, come across, where you often will have a research group that's working on quite complex technology, where there's a whole lot of potentially regulatory aspects involved. Often it's in the life sciences or in agriculture or pharmaceuticals, but there are of course other complex tech, high-tech type projects as well, where a university is involved in this kind of research, and then there may well be a private entity that's wanting to get involved in a similar kind of technology and needs to work with the university, or the university itself is wanting to spin out the research. But because it's complex technology, it's not your traditional low-hanging fruit, and so as a result, it's often quite challenging when it comes to getting investment, looking for funding, dealing with exit strategies, and planning all the things you need to do so that you have a successful exit down the line. So that was really the motivation for this topic. And so I've asked a number of really fantastic people that I've kind of got to know over the years that are in this space to be part of the panel. I'm going to give very, very brief introductions to them, and then they're actually going to tell you a bit more about themselves and their organizations. And then once we're done with that, we'll have a Q&A session. So I'm hoping that you'll get involved and jump in with questions, and we can have some robust discussion. So first of all, we have Thomas Schmidt, who is with Adams & Adams. He's a senior associate in the patent department. He's a patent attorney. And he deals a lot in the life sciences space, not just filing and prosecution, but also on the regulatory side. We have Mandeli Peterson, who's from Wits Innovation. She's the seed fund manager, and that, of course, is a really important space for this kind of technology. We have Jatani Chelsea, who's from NIPMO. She's the director, and it's really fantastic that you've taken the time to be here. I know how incredibly busy you are, so thank you. And then we have Moritz Venter, who's from, well, a bunch of places, but at the moment representing Skeg Innovation. He's a serial entrepreneur, I guess one could say, and has a wealth of knowledge and experience in the space, not just on entrepreneurship, but also, you know, in high-tech, difficult tech, regulatory matters. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Excellent. So Thomas, kick it off. Go for it.
Okay, first up. So, hello, everyone. Thanks for coming and attending. And thank you, everyone. It's nice to be in such a distinguished panel. So, as Joanne said, I'm Thomas. I'm representing the patent attorney side of the equation here. And I thought my role as first speaker is maybe I should just set the scene for the sort of issues that you encounter in these kinds of situations. So I just also want to say right from the beginning that each of the points I'm going to raise, I'm going to basically just blitz through an enormous amount of legislation and issues. I'm going to be just touching on things rather than going into a deep dive. Each of these things could more or less be a lecture or a series or discussion in and of itself. And as I say, I'm just gesturing here to the complexities involved. I think one thing I'd like to point out from the beginning, if you can see on the presentation, is that there's a tendency when dealing with a product, when dealing with a new idea, to sort of silo the issues out into their constituent components. You've got this product, you're going to look at the intellectual property, you're going to discuss that with an attorney, you're going to do the commercialization aspect that you're going to do inside, and the regulatory compliance you might discuss with a different attorney, or you might try and do it in-house, but you tend to silo them off into their different little boxes. And just as an immediate sort of issue that crops up when doing this is that there are multiple different types of intellectual property that pertain to a single product. We've used an example here of a sort of a Buchu product, which will become relevant in a second. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can see there's a lot of potential IP that you're going to be dealing with for one thing. Now, for this Buchu, I think I should just also say that this is a great thing to use as an example because it's a local species or series of species. It's got a whole bunch of uses, including there was a fad for putting it in beer a while back that nobody regrets having disappeared. And the oil is used in cosmetics and for medicines and for animal feed and goodness knows what. They use it for everything.
I must tell you, Buchu is very nice in gin.
Oh, yeah, no, Buchu gin's good. Buchu beer, not so much. And so if you decide to use this in your cosmetic or put it into food, or beer or whatever, you're immediately going to bump into the Foodstuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectants Act, where it's probably going to fall into one of the definitions that the Act pertains to. And you are then going to have to firstly decide where it fits into these different parts of the Act, and then you're going to have to start adhering to the various different requirements in terms of labeling and everything else. And this will be also a recurring theme, that not adhering to this Act is an offense and can result in various different penalties. And repeat offenders get punished more and more harshly. So, say instead you've decided that this thing has medicinal properties, you're going to then immediately bump into the Medicines and Related Substances Act. This is now going to involve even more complexity because you're going to have to decide whether it's a medicine, a complementary medicine, or a health supplement. Each of these things has different legal definitions. There are different requirements for registration. So there's different levels of regulatory compliance that you have to adhere to. Similarly, if you decide to feed it to animals for whatever reason, medicine wasn't a big enough market for you, you want to give it to your cat or whatever, then it's going to show up with the Fertilizers, Farm Feeds, Agricultural Remedies and Stock Remedies Act 36 of 1947, for which there's no nice acronym, so we're just going to have to use the whole thing.
Act 36.
Yes, Act 36, sometimes the Fertilizers Act, but yes. And then again, you also have to register it. There are slightly different requirements depending on where it falls in terms of the Act. And in fact, this is also where some of your intellectual property concerns will come in, because there are some things for animal or stock remedies, there are certain registrations, and you can actually, that essentially forms a form of IP in and of itself. Now, the next big one you're going to bump into is the fact that it's a Southern African species, it's an indigenous species, so it falls under the ambit of NEMBA, which means that buchu is an indigenous biological resource. It has associated traditional knowledge. It is going to then, you're going to have to go through the process of complying with NEMBA. You're going to have to deal with the permitting process. This, again, could be a whole thing in and of itself. And yet another running theme here, non-compliance, there are penalties. And these include massive potential fines. So you then need to deal with that aspect as well. Finally, if you want to file a patent, this is a slightly more minor thing, but we deal with it every day. When you file a patent, you need to fill in a form P26 as part of the process. The P26 means that you make a statement as part of your application where you say whether or not the invention is derived from an indigenous biological resource, whether there's traditional knowledge involved. And a false statement on this form can basically scupper your entire patent. It's another consideration that you have to make here, and this is one where, unlike a lot of things to do with patent administration, if you make this false statement ab initio, you can't actually repair it. It might just permanently damage your invention. So another one that you're going to bump into is the IPR Act. I'm not going to speak to this one, thankfully. I'm going to leave that to Jatani because this is her bag completely. So I'm not even going to touch it, but you're going to have to be aware of that. And then, just to sort of top it all off, if you want to move this thing overseas, you want to offshore, you want to sell to that large multinational that's showing so much interest, you then have to go through the Currency and Exchanges Act, you have to get written approval, and there are various different issues related to that. There are various different requirements for getting approval, and again, it's a
topic on its own.
It's a topic on its own. It's a thing you have to deal with. So what you've effectively done by deciding to go and make a product out of buchu is you've kind of dumped yourself right into this web of different regulatory requirements that you effectively have to deal with. And the complexity of those requirements is entirely situational. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's going to depend on the nature of your product, on the origins, including where you're harvesting it from, on how you want to commercialize it, whether you want to go overseas. It's all going to change how you have to deal with this particular conundrum. And that is just one potential plant that you're dealing with. So I think what I want to then to sort of circle back to what I pointed out at the beginning, this means that you can't approach it in a siloed or fashion. You have to treat these things in a holistic fashion and as part of an overall effort, sometimes in conversation with multiple different specialists in the field at once, and going forwards and making sure that everything fits with your ongoing commercialization efforts and strategy. So instead of a sort of a separate bunch of silos, you end up with this Venn diagram with your product sitting right at the middle of it. And I think with that, I'm going to hand off to the other Tani to speak to the slide that I didn't have to do.
Which is 10 slides on its own.
Yes, exactly.
Luckily afforded me that lecture opportunity for the IPR. Thank you so much. And I think this was a great way to explain how complex it is. And I don't even think you touched on just the tipping point of it, because for all of that intellectual property, you have separate legislations, separate requirements. If we go into the regulatory environment, apart from just the local legislations, we've got just international legislation, SAPRA approval, should we want to give it to humans. And so I think you've set the scene exceptionally well. And although we think about it in a linear way, I like the way where we are starting to converge, because if we do not think about commercialization from the outset, which will inform our intellectual property, which will inform whether we choose it as an additive or a feed for our cat, we are putting ourselves up for failure. But luckily, that is not what I really have to make the decisions on. That's why we do have our attorneys here to advise us on what would be those best strategies. The oversight that I wanted to give to you today is specifically on this Intellectual Property Rights from Publicly Financed Research and Development Act, or for short, the IPR Act. And I wanted to start off to say that this legislation is one piece in a big innovation ecosystem. And I think Thomas has set it up so apt to show that this legislation, although it is my entire job and my entire life, it is one puzzle in an innovation ecosystem. It did not come out of nowhere. There was a very big policy evolution from the Department of Science and Technology, then Science and Innovation, now Science, Technology and Innovation, which informed this, what we all referred to previously as the innovation chasm. So various institutions or legislations were put in place to plug the holes in a leaking bucket. One of these plugs were the IPR Act, which is NIPMO, the National Intellectual Property Management Office, as the implementing office of that legislation. But we also have TIA. We also have various other components that work towards this ecosystem. So the IPR Act specifically, it's got a very small mandate. It only works with intellectual property which emanates from publicly funded research and development. So research and development, I think the Frascati manual defines it in 406 pages, roughly there. And it's very important to know that not everything that you do will be research and development. And so not everything that is outcome will the Act will apply for. I told Thomas just off the, no, it was Joanne that I spoke off the cuff, and I said, this, you need regulatory approval from NIPMO as well, and as part of this exchange control, there's a sentence in the bottom, if it is publicly funded R&D, contact NIPMO. So we get these phone calls, 11 o'clock at night. Treasury says I must speak to you. And then my first question is always, is it R&D? Is it publicly funded? So it is luckily a very narrow mandate, but if we think that we are spending quite a bit, maybe not as much as we want, but 0.7% of our GDP, roughly, on research and development, this is quite a big output that is coming. So in essence, NIPMO is to be seen as an enabler. We are not here to try to make your life difficult, whether you are the university, whether you are a collaborator, whether you are a funder. We are here and we see ourselves as an enabler. Yes, it might be seen as a regulatory office. Yes, there might be regulatory issues that you need to have to comply with, but we are here to enable as part of the innovation ecosystem. And in essence, what we want to say is that if your tax money is being spent on R&D, let's just make sure we benefit from it. And by benefit, we are talking in the broadest sense. We just want to be accountable for what happens to our tax money so that we don't give it away for free, so that we know what we have, and that we can actually, not just now that we know what we have, let it sit on the shelf. If you're a university and a science council, there's an obligation on you to commercialize. There's therefore an obligation on you to make sure that you go out, get that SMME, get that funder, get that collaborator, so that what comes out of our publicly funded research and development actually makes impact. So how would we do that? As NIPMO, we're only about 10 people in the office, and that's the entire office. We can't do that, but we have set up a technology transfer office, so it's a TTO, OTT, innovation office in every university and science councils. We support them with paying partly or fully funding contract salaries. We help them with technology transfer activities, training, hosting events, workshops, seeing them as the extension of doing what the Act says within their environment. It's nothing worse than a researcher wanting to talk to someone from government. No, they will never trust us. That's why you have the technology transfers. It's their people. They're going to talk to them. And so we have these technology transfer offices in every university and encourage everyone to come and speak to them. They are open. It is their job to make sure that technology is transferred. So help them get that right. But we also know that, who said, was it Hamilton said that the IP attorneys are quite expensive, or they want our money. I think that was the word he used. And so in order to assist in that, the government realized that we can't just have these people, but not help them secure that intellectual property. So we have an intellectual property fund where we pay up to 50% a rebate of the patent or the IP prosecution and maintenance costs. It is a bit of a conundrum because you need to pay first and then you will get your rebate back. So we say up to 30%, but if National Treasury doesn't like us, it might be less. But aiding in that, identifying the IP that's coming out of our R&D, helping get it protected, and getting it in the right way protected. We don't want everything to be patents when it can be trademarks. We don't want everything to be a trademark when we should actually have a design and maybe keep something as a trade secret, or having a suite, as we see now, a suite of things that we need to consider. And it's also great to incentivize. So we are trying to work with SMMEs. We are doing training because we hope that if you have a formed and skilled, not only technology transfer office, who upskill their researchers and their students, if we have SMMEs, hopefully they will come to our universities, they will come to them and get that partnership that we hope to have. So it is to create that supporting an environment, a holistic ecosystem. No, we don't do it alone. We work with WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. We work very closely with CIPC, which we understand is the Patent and Trademark Office. We work with TIA, and together we are trying to make this innovation ecosystem work. So that's the longest I'm going to talk. Just want to quickly show you some stats. You would recall I mentioned about these, they need to identify the disclosures. This is what it looked like. Universities and science councils report to NIPMO their invention disclosures, some call it knowledge disclosures, and all the new ones you can see there in the graph. I decided to take a snapshot of the stages of development just for 2023 and 2024. As expected, we can see that 40% of all the disclosures on the database is under evaluation. That makes sense. The research has just come in. I've got an idea. Now the OTT will go, let me do a novelty search. Let me see what I can do. Is it going to work? Before I go to the attorneys. And while they might apply, when we move into that orange part that is the 39%, that 39% is disclosed and protected. In other words, we have a granted right. This is not provisionals. There is a granted right for those disclosures. But what's super interesting to me, and these snapshots change literally every year, it was so good to see that 9% of our disclosures, and by our, I mean your disclosures, this is your tax money, has been licensed pre-revenue. And 5% is actually made commercial success. So it's licensed, commercialized post-revenue. Really encouraging stats. And we never expect that 47% to become smaller and smaller and smaller because we're constantly getting in new disclosures that we are working on. Just as I presume these slides will be shared, I just wanted to show you, this is the innovation, our intellectual property fund. On average, the office receives about 45 million rands worth of claims. Yes, some gets a bit disqualified purely because it was reported incorrectly or something like that. And out of that, we aim to pay about 50% of those claims. Over the past 11 years, we have dispersed 450 million rands worth of claims were dispersed for IP protection. On average, we try to pay about 20 2 million rand out, depending on what is there. So there is support for IP protection and maintenance costs for, and I have to say this, intellectual property owned by universities and science councils. We have identified that there is a lack for support for SMMEs. We are working within the department to see what type of funding mechanisms should be put in place. The Innovation Bridge portal is one ecosystem that helps you with that type of innovation support. Where can I go? We are aware that the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation is looking at a pre-seed fund, so to assist with what we understand is the seed fund. And so trying to get access to our SMMEs as well to get that IP support. And luckily some of the support has got a sort of built-in assistance as well. This is what our Offices of Technology Transfer look like. Being from government, it's very important for me to go and say that we have supported over 200 partially employment jobs at these universities. Also, maybe if I go back, just to show that it's not just about the jobs, we're also helping with technology transfer activities and, getting these set up. This is my favorite slide. So you would have recalled that in our last session, we spoke about exchange control. And I mentioned that in my comment that you also need NIPMO approval should you want to sell off or assign your IP local or offshore. And this is the statistics for the applications that we have received. I can categorically say we approve maybe over 80% of the applications that come to us, and we will work with you. We are open for that. As a university, we will work with you to make sure that we achieve what is the best for the country. And so what was super encouraging for me to see is if you look at the approved local assignments on this chart, I think it's 76 or 74, 76, 74. Sorry. Thank you. Almost 50% went to university startups and spin-out companies. Now that is great. Our tax money is being used to create a product, hopefully, that can do the regulatory things that we can do the commercialization for, but we're plowing it back into setting up companies that is held by or guided by our universities and making it happen. More employment, contribution to our tax fiscus, hopefully we can bring the country up. So that was for me fantastic. We also see there was 9% to SMMEs, absolutely non-related to the university. Truly encouraging stats. It's not on this slide, but the offshore assignments, majority of those were for philanthropic reasons. So the malaria, obviously I forget it now, the then Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the NIH, but we knew that up front. The university knew that up front as well as part of their contract negotiations. And then just to end off to say that we can see stuff happen. This is a small sample of spin-out companies coming from our universities and science councils. And when we got the topic, we were speaking about not the low-hanging fruits, but here we have anything from, if you look at Picker Power, that in the bottom left corner from WITS, this is electricity, supply electricity. Hyrax from UWC, they are accredited for giving the first, identifying the first Omicron variant. If we look at, for example, if we go to the next slide, this is maybe not a low-hanging fruit, but most special one for me is from Central University of Technology. They've got what we call a brew spoon. They have now where you can take your coffee, brew your coffee online. It's sold in Cape Union Mart. University of Pretoria, again, one of my favorites, is an insecticidal netting where you can buy socks on Take-A-Lot for if you go camping, if you go somewhere where it's insecticide already in your socks, in your clothing, so that the mosquitoes don't bite you. And maybe if we take CPUT there as well, just to not, there's so many, but CPUT is selling a supplement. All of this was done by your tax money, making the impact in our country, and some of those apples from ARC is actually exported. Our grapes are exported. And so this is hopefully what the Act can do. And if there's only one message that I maybe want to leave you with is, yes, it gets complex. Please contact your technology transfer office. Please contact your lawyers. But contact us as well. Know that we are here to assist. Know that we are there to make sure that we are sensible with what happens to our R&D. Sorry I took too much time.
No, thank you, Dani. Very helpful.
Sorry.
So yeah, Mandeli's going to carry on from a seed fund perspective.
Yes. Let's go for it. Afternoon, everyone. Morning.
Morning.
Okay, doke. So I'm going to look at complex technologies, but from a tech transfer perspective. So as Joanne mentioned, I'm from WITS. I work in the WITS Innovation Center, or the WIC as we call it. So the vision for WITS is that we are at the leading edge of innovation that impacts society. And with that in mind, the WIC was established as a hub for innovation. We've got 3 primary programs within the WIC. One of them being the Industry Solutions Lab. Currently, we've got a partnership with a telco, and essentially the Industry Solutions Lab works in a way where the business units from the telco identify areas where further research and development are required, and then they work with the lab to sort of find solutions for that. And then we've got the Innovation Systems Lab, and that is essentially where the university IP gets prototyped and developed. And then the third program we have is Innovation Support, which is the university's tech transfer function, and that's where we work with the IP management, IP strategies, IP protection, obviously for publicly funded research. We do have some of the outliers that come to the fore from time to time, but it is generally publicly funded. Okay, so you can see the diagram on the right is all the different parts to the technology transfer process, and there's a lot of moving parts. Shatani referred to it earlier on that there's a lot that happens at the same time. You may also see that the process most likely starts, or ideally starts at the top. We've got research and discovery and moves all the way through the different cycles. What I've tried to indicate with the black arrows is that the small one is that it's not a linear process. So there's a few iterations from time to time. We go back and forth. We kind of know what development looks like, but then we go back to re-look at something and to retest it to make it more efficient, more effective. And then the black arrow sort of is to indicate where the hard work starts in terms of funding. So as I said to you, I'm going to speak from a tech transfer perspective, but more specifically to look at seed funding and what that enables us to do within the tech transfer process. So seed funding is intended to stimulate and intensify technology innovation. It's there to bridge those financial requirements between research outputs to something that has some value that can be further developed so that we can realize the value that we think we could have in society. Also, seed funding is very specific in terms of the stage of development where innovations generally are. It's early stage. The risks are high. So what we're trying to do at that stage is to develop prototypes, to test the prototypes, but also to build a business case. In terms of what the Tech Transfer Office does then, we administer the fund, we look at the governance, monitoring, evaluation, alignment, and investment parameters. Essentially, practically how it works on the ground is that we get a call for funding. We manage the process, so we would look at what applications are available. We look at whether the applications that are available, the stage of development fits this, so it can't just be an idea. Generally for seed funding, we're looking at the TRL, sometimes 2, ideally 3 to 5, and that's generally where we find it. But then we also look at whether the project lies within the objectives of the seed fund. In Tia's case, sometimes it's broad and it could be sort of a project from any faculty, but sometimes it's very specific. So our university, for example, 2 years ago had one in the Faculty of Health Sciences. So we need to see whether those projects then align with the objectives of the fund. What we also then do is there's committees set up. So it's a very structured process. There's good guidelines and good regulation of it. What we also do is ensure that reporting happens. There are set intervals, different funds required at different times. And I think also from a tech transfer perspective, more than just reporting on the fund and whether they are progressing or not, it's also about moving the project further around that cycle to see that we get something that does not comply, but does fit the market, that can then translate into value at some point. Maybe just to demonstrate it to you, I'll use one of the projects we've got in our portfolio. And I think listening to Thomas, I feel like I don't want to oversimplify it, but it makes complete sense. So This particular project is from the Faculty of Science. It is a compound that's synthesized from a natural UV. Oh, it's a compound synthesized from a renewable raw material, and it's for the purposes of a UV filter. Currently, the inventors are, we've got one inventor or a group of inventors from WITS. The other two inventors come from Johannes Gutenberg University. So those are two parties. And then we've got a startup that came across this at the very early stage from Germany and has been kind of following the development all along. They've recently filed a PCT.
What is that?
Cashew nut shells.
Ah, okay.
So what the process is, they extract the nut and then they sometimes discard, they burn the shells, or they create an oil from the shells and they use the oil in plastic products.
Okay.
And so there's the funder, it's a startup, or not the funder, there's a startup from Germany that sees the potential in this. There is a funder from the EU that has provided in the region of 650,000 in seed funding, so that is included in the 925K. The 925K is euro. No, it's not. The 925K is what they've identified for the next phase of development. There is also, they're obviously trying to build a value chain or build up the value chain. So they've identified a potential supplier of the liquid. And then there is also there was a third one I wanted to tell you guys of. A supplier, and then also for scale-up capability. So they've identified another party. All of these relationships or potential partnerships or collaborations obviously need agreements in place. Part of our role is to ensure that it's there. There's everything from a letter of intent to collaboration agreements, partnership agreements, service level agreements. And I do think that it's a lot to expect of a researcher. I think the value in this is that we've got a startup who has the energy and the enthusiasm for it, and so they act like a driver. They do push it and ensure that everything, or that there's more than one thing happening at a particular time. In terms of the funding, as I said, they've received, it's 32,000 euro in grant funding, and they plan on raising 225 in grant funding, and the rest would be for equity or for the development stage. In terms of where they're at the moment, so they are trying to conduct some of the regulatory approvals, mostly in the EU. There's obviously dermatological testing that they're trying to do. There's everything that goes with consumers, so make sure that it's safe for consumers to sort of take. They are also at the same time, it was the value chain, as I was saying, they're trying to do it very sort of green. So they're looking at natural ways of preserving it and moving it through. They are scaling up production at the same time, and then it's obviously all the IP stuff. In terms of the IP stuff, what we've also found that might be interesting is that it's definitely not at a commercial stage yet, so it's got quite a way to go. And so we're looking at using an allowance agreement to enable the startup company to sort of advance it, and then we will get to the commercialization negotiations when the product actually is at that stage. What we also find in terms of the development is, and I say to you guys, it's an iterative process. They did it in the lab and they got great results. And then the startup company sort of found a niche in the market. We're going green, so we go back and we look at what chemicals are we using to extract the compound. And the chemical maybe doesn't comply with the dermatological regulatory stuff. So we go back and we change that again. And that's meant that the researchers at WITS and the researchers at JGU are all working on it at the same time as we're trying to say to a facility, we need scaled up production. But we're not really sure on which other compounds we're going to use, but we are sure, and we do want the quality of this. And we've tried a number of suppliers for the cashew nut shell as well. And so in trying to get that, there's often no formal businesses. Sometimes it's very rural. They don't have half the documentation. And within our university system, obviously, for you to be a supplier of anything to the university, you need to have everything in place before you can be loaded. So I think the role of the Tech Transfer Office essentially is to try and keep all these things, all the balls in the air at the same time, and not be hamstrung by processes, although we recognize that it's there and it's necessary, because sometimes it does stop us to say, okay, fine, hold on. Maybe I'm not checking things properly here. Let's go back and have a look. And then just to say that they have identified the market opportunity, and obviously they would start off in Europe and South Africa first, but then there is an opportunity globally. So it's exciting times.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great example. Fantastic. Thanks, Maritz.
Thanks. Yes, hi everyone. I'm going to talk about, just to highlight my journey from an innovator, aspiring entrepreneur, and navigating through the complexity. And I'm talking about complexity then just not of a product, but then the whole process, the whole landscape, IP strategy, commercialization strategy, regulatory strategy, and our experience in that. So from the left-hand side, where I started out was at university with the main goal with a commercial lens. I was interested in life science, but primarily from what's the business of science. And it was actually spawned from, I call it a force, a desire from projects that they were busy with. I'm going to give away my age here, but with trying to map the human genome. So showing, so it was combined with linguistic and aesthetic appreciation from photos of those labs and what they were busy trying to do, and the promises, the potential. And I think that's what stuck is, and I'll get to that a bit later, but the message for the entrepreneurial innovator is, what are you imagining, and then taking actions in conformity with that desire all along that path. So out of that, we started a company just on paper, got seed funding broke all the entrepreneurial rules of not going to your friends and family. We got funding from a family friend, just to pay rent at the university, to pay rent lab space. We couldn't pay salaries and stuff like that. I was fortunate to go to a business consultancy, and the next up is Cape Venture Partners, and it's amazing. They had exactly the same issues of engineers and scientists not knowing how to commercialize their technology, and they were set up at that time from a bunch of wealthy guys who did exits overseas and locally, and it was hands-on experience of their business that they acquired. And how to do business, but we found that, the model didn't really work. You have an entrepreneur, they don't have a lot of money. The TIA seed fund and those things weren't. I mean, they weren't incubators, accelerators, and seed funds available. So it's out of pocket from the entrepreneur. So there was a tough one. Out of that, what helped there was building a network through those through Cape Venture Partners. That's why I met. IP lawyers at that time, and that's where Joanne and I also met at the time, setting up a team for us as we are the techies, and then we have the IP specialists, the business advisors, and we had that, you have that awareness that, look, you cannot run this business at this stage. You need advisors, you need help. And then I could go full-time in the company, Alzarjan, attracting funds from a venture capital unit from the government funding. And it was interesting at that time when we sat with them. They highlighted the first question they asked is this IP, are you a spin out from the university? And we said no. Said, okay, good, then we can stay and have this discussion. So that was interesting because at that time we wanted to be the local university's first spin out biotech company. And they told us, look, dude, we are building satellites and stuff. Biotech isn't even on our radar. You have to go on your own. So it forced us now to pitch harder. And luckily now, for us, it worked out. Technology transfer offices and frameworks and those things didn't exist. So, I mean, now when students ask me, but what should we do? I said, stay at university. Because I knew the patent, unfortunately, the IP licensing, the IP costs, the budgets for that, the infrastructure, the accounting fees, all of that. The university will take, they will handle that at the incubator, at the accelerator. Anyway, started there, we learned the skills of pitching to investors, writing the patents with Joanne, and she broadened my horizons in not only how to write a patent and how to, from an IP strategy perspective, how to articulate your technology. And more importantly, how to articulate complexity. And to me, that's what we started bringing into the business schools, talks to MBAs, engineers. So I decided then to do a business degree at Cape Town Business School, with the main purpose to find out what do you need to do to handle complexity with yourself. And luckily the faculty allowed that. We pitched that and that's careful exploration of the entrepreneurial innovator's self. When you have sleepless nights, your salary is dependent on the venture capitalist funding tranche. If you didn't hit your milestones based on biological uncertainty that you couldn't predict, those are sleepless nights. And then sometimes you get a cringe when academics say, "But I'm also actually an entrepreneur." Then you go, "Whoa." But that's just a side thing now. So out of that, we developed a theory, and of all these experiences of entrepreneurs and innovators, that you have this imagination, this dream, this passion. And what is interesting is there are so many variables that are differentially regulated, and you go through these highs and lows, but for some reason you're staying in the game. You still keep staying in the game. And what was that? What is that called? And found out that is a sort of intrinsic desire that it doesn't necessarily lead to satisfaction, but it's a desire that keeps you in the game. And out of that theory, while I was busy with that, the group SCEG, it's an engineering firm, product development firm, that asked me to come on board. And they gone through an evolution. They originally started in 2005, also about 20 years experience now of prototype development. That's how they started out. Everything is done under one roof, and the owner came from the Navy, so he's got a great passion for boats. But at SCEG, with about 25, 28 engineers, specialists, industrial designers, they're all engineers or designers. We can develop. We can operate in quite a diverse range of sectors. For instance, this is a plant phenotyping machine. This is an academic innovation from a university in Saudi Arabia. So we already work with local and international universities. IP, developed from academic innovation, and so we've built these prototypes for them, and it's quite broad. It's from amputees that need to sterilize their sleeves, for contamination and odors, right up to automation, robotics, object recognition, those kind of projects. So what happened at SCEG was, just from a product development or prototyping, they said, "Look, we want to go through this evolution. We can't keep doing this, selling our time. We have the specialized skills, and we have universities and startups coming to us, and with IP, either develop then, okay, what should I do with this technology? How can I commercialize it?" And leveraging this experience of 20 years and building products, they said, "Look, let's develop within SCEG. We have the product development unit. We have the manufacturing unit, because what SCEG offers is not just building your product. Sometimes they'll tell the entrepreneur, "Look, you have the design here, but this isn't going to work to scale it and to make volume manufacturing. So we'll help you with that whole process to industrialize it, actually." And then a new unit, because we got all this interest from universities and TTOs, said, "We have all this IP, not necessarily blockbuster IP, dormant IP lying there in all these theses." And they said, "What can we do with this?" And we set up a unit called SCEG Innovation Capital. And that's when SCEG said, "Look, come in, because we only focused on hardware, software. We know that deep tech, biotech, nanotech, medical tech, this is the game." And so I'm the only scientist at SCEG at this time. But luckily, we were able then to develop out of all our experiences, the pitching to venture capitalists, the due diligences, the patenting, the commercialization strategies, how do you assess a team? Can this team, I think you've mentioned it, we need a champion. Sometimes you get a chartered accountant and the side hustle was a genetic testing. We want to know, are you immersed in this thing? And we talk about domain knowledge. So we've developed a model. It took us quite a few months. And that's what one of the aspirations from TTOs that came to us and say, we have all this pre-revenue IP. How do we value it? How can we go to an investor and how do we set up this intellectual property as a business to go to investors, partners, collaborators? So we set up this model that we are now pitching to TTOs. We're doing this now for international and local universities. This is still a trial run, but not only do we identify intellectual property of value, we show them then, there's a process where we show them we can identify based on a weighted matrix of variables, the team and the technology, the TRL, especially that. But then we take it a bit further and say we would want to partner with you if this technology is really compelling, and out of our model we see there's a business side of this. So there's a next phase, and we call it a discovery. And then we sit down, a few workshops, engage with the innovators, and then we really find out why did that innovator, why did they develop this innovation? And what we find sometimes surprising is the innovator would come to us and they say, look, this is the direction I want to go in. And after so many questions of, but why did you decide? And then we found out, it's very emotional actually. And then we see, you know what? Looking at the market analysis, technical feasibility, commercial feasibility, IP strategy, let's move it this way. And we can present it like that. And then we show in the discovery phase, wow, we discover the competitive edge here, right there. So actually what we do is we frame the value. The TTO would come to us and say, we have something here. What is it? We define the value. Then we create it with the product development team, a prototype. And then a next phase at SCEC is proof of value, we call it. We make it. We make a demonstrator. And we test it with a few stakeholders in the market. And more we see projects coming to us with complexity, with it's biotech, medtech, nanotech, or complex interface with hardware, software, and life sciences. So at this stage, we welcome complexity and uncertainty, but not based only on the product, on the people and the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much. So that was incredible introduction to the topic, I think, and there's already lots of questions that are percolating in my brain. I have a few, but I do want to first just open it up to the people in the room in case you've got any questions that are like at the tip of your tongue right now that you'd like to raise. Otherwise, I'll get stuck into mine, and then we can always see where the discussion goes. I don't know if there are any virtual questions. No. Okay, cool. Yes, Danae.
Okay, maybe I should introduce myself to those who don't know.
Yes, please introduce yourself first.
Okay, my name is Dineo Masokwani. I'm from Wits University. I'm with Mendele in the Innovation Support Unit. My question is directed to Jetani. With regards to reporting to NIPMO, we're looking at publicly funded innovations that report to NIPMO. I just wanted clarity on the full cost model, whereby industry maybe is supporting the research and development at university. How do we navigate that? How do we do the reporting when it comes to that?
Thank you.
Go for it, yes.
I've got a question. Thanks, Nao. So what we will remember is that if you have a full cost, let's just maybe go 2 steps back. What is full cost? Full cost is when you have a research project and the direct as well as the indirect costs is covered by your funder, who's not a public entity. So that funder then pays the entire research project. Therefore, it's deemed that our tax money is not going into that research and development, and the IPR Act does not apply. So you don't have to report it to us. What we have seen is what our universities are doing is they actually have, it doesn't happen that often because typically what happens if full cost is paid, our universities might want to consider adding a bit of a profit margin, and typically those ones are assigned back to the funder, because the funder would say, paid for everything, I'll pay a little bit extra for your expertise and so forth, but I want to own it. In the instances where where the funder pays full cost, IPR Act does not apply, and the university own it. What we have seen is our universities and science councils manage it on a separate database, because it's very few. However, we are going to roll out the IP and TT survey, where we are specifically asking that question, because we're making an assumption that, full cost and you as the university own it is happening not as often. And hopefully we want to see, is that a true statement or not? And with a survey, that is a specific question that we're asking. But the bottom line is just, you don't have to report to us or to NIPMO, because it is not publicly funded and the IPR Act does not exist. That does not apply to that IP.
Thank you. So Chitani actually has a question. So yes, please.
Sorry, I just want to maybe ask you a question with regards to this model that you have put up. My first comment is that, is this something that will be pitched to all our universities and science councils so that we can have a big ecosystem using your services? 2, where are you benefiting from this? Just as a purely cynical question, I can see the value that you can give to the universities. How does it benefit you as SCIG as part of this environment as well?
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. So we've, with a unit with SCIG and not selling time anymore, and we're still busy with product development, prototype development, manufacturing, we have a business focus on wealth creation as well. And part of that business focus is partnership with and spin-out companies. And then we will be the CTO of that company. So that's how so that's part of the probably the value that we bring. The other part was TTOs that came to us and said, we have this problem, and instead of paying 200,000 Rand from an audit firm doing a discounted cash flow, which is probably unrealistic on a pre-revenue academic innovation, we said we have a different approach, and it's developed through lessons learned in entrepreneurship, business, prototype development, all of that. So we'll ask a smaller fee to do this for you, but then the goal of that is to position the spin-out for success, to go to an investor. So if we believe in it as well, we do it at partner rates, the development or the product development. But the initial screening phase is look, we'll ask you some funding just to, as we call it, wash our face for the time, so that we can see, is this, and what helps is then what now feedback is the TTO say, thanks, now we know if we should still keep on maintaining these patents, or should we go ahead with this product. So I hope it's beneficial for on both sides.
Awesome. Cool. Yes, Hamilton.
Thank you. I'm Hamilton Mpidi, and I'm from the Tshwane University of Technology, Innovation and Technology Transfer Office. I have small 2 questions. First to Mendele. Mendele, you spoke about the innovators in residence. Who are these? Are they your researchers? And also, have you thought of having mentor and coaches in resident, to support innovators that aspire to be entrepreneurs? Jetani, any update about the IPR Act amendment? And Dr. Venter, are we going to invite you to our Gauteng Technology Transfer Forum? We have all the TTOs from Science Council and universities are there. It would be lovely to get this presentation. Thank you.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm not on. I don't
No, you are.
think. Am I? Oh, cool. Okay, Hamilton, to your first question, the innovators in residence are usually from industry. So currently in the arrangement with the telco, it is the business units who have representatives that work at WITS a lot of the time. Sometimes we go to them, but a lot of the time they're at WITS physically even, working on issues that they identified within their business units, and they develop it through. And it's a long-term thing. I think we're now second year of it now. And then to your second question, if we had more money, we would do it tomorrow. It's something that comes up all the time. We'd love to have an in-residence program, especially because we find that a lot of our projects don't have drivers. Like we see the value, the researcher sees the value, but somebody that is dedicated, like I think Mura said,
Champions.
that's immersed in it, that will go out there and do it. So if we have money, I think we've already submitted one proposal. We can resubmit it 10 more times. We just need the funding, but we see the value in it.
Thank you so much, Hamilton. To your question, I think we had a draft ready about 2 years ago, and I am taking the blame for not pushing it through, because every 3 months something changes, and I go, ooh, no, hold on. Let's think about it this way. Hold on, now AI comes, now we have, and so I think what has happened as well is that one of the initial pushes was NIPMO needs to be an entity on its own. I know and you know there's no money, so we can put those things in place. How would it work in practice? And so I am 100% taking the blame, and I've got a draft in my inbox. Taking every email that has ever been sent to NIPMO is logged. Every answer is logged. We have we receive about 60 official email queries, between 60 and 100 emails in a year. All of those are logged. The reviews, all of that has taken place. Ironically, we get contradicting opinions, whether it's from a review or from an advisory board, or quite frankly from our surveys. So I think for me, as part of a strategic way, we had to wait for the administration to come into place. Secondly, I think it will be very important that before we push it out is that we have to see what the IP and TT survey has said. What is the trends? Where are we going? We have a draft ready, and because we are 3 patent attorneys in NIPMO itself, with 2 other attorneys, we don't go to DSI Legal to draft it for us. We have the draft ready. It's just for them to vet it. So we're trying to circumvent that part a little bit, trying to get all the legal opinions up front. We have received legal opinions. We have one from Joanne, actually, that is part of the supporting documentation. And I think what we try to do is we don't want to, have any unintended consequences that we can foresee, and that's what I found every 2 to 3 months. I'm going, hold on, this cannot work. We want to be more specific. We try to make it simpler. We try to actually make your life. I think NIPMO's ultimate goal in this is to make sure that the lives of our technology transfer office not only being empowered, but set up structures where we can help you, so that NIPMO is not relied on anymore, but you are the centerpiece of your university, and you can take it forward with the legislation as your backing. So the answer to that is definitely not in the next 6 months, but the draft is ready. Just waiting for the outcome. So yeah.
You know you're going to have to eventually commit.
We will. We will.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Hi.
Thandi.
Okay. Good morning. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Thandi. Currently at Mintech at the Office of Technology Transfer. And I have 2 questions. First one to Jetani, and I'm repeating this from the last meeting we were in. And I looked at the outputs of universities in terms of commercialization, specifically focusing on spin-outs. And I think when we compare, we can see that universities have made headway in terms of spin-outs. And I think for science councils, I saw ARC, I think it's a license on a variety for apples. You can see that there isn't really much that is going on, even though science councils are better positioned actually to commercialize more than universities. But that's not happening. Then the PFMA question that I come to. The last time you mentioned that NIPMO is in talks with Treasury to look at a waiver to enable science councils to be able to commercialize. I'd like to know how far that process is and whether we should expect something soon, because our portfolio is a little bit ready. We have a few nice things that we can commercialize if you enable us to. So the second question is to Maurice. And I think I share the story because I was a part of the Azajin story when you were sitting in the launch lab, Maurice. And one could really appreciate the experience and the contribution to SCAG. I've previously worked with SCAG in some product development on some technologies before the new model.
Right.
And coincidentally, we had a meeting with SCAG this week on one of the technologies, the new technologies. for mining industry applications, classification of something. And I think my question is around the proof of value, and it speaks to what Jetani asked to say. What is the partnership structure that you propose? Because I saw that when you develop a proof of value, is it a service that SCEG provides as part of the prototype development, or are you proposing a partnership where you could, for Mintech, like I said, we don't have spin-outs. If we are commercializing as a division within Mintech. So it just follows business development where a product is rolled out into the market. We don't have a separate entity that commercializes specifically. So I'm just trying to understand how that could work in terms of what SCEG is proposing.
Okay, no,
currently,
great,
yeah.
thanks. Yeah. So our screening process, we have a few decision gates, and what we do is if an innovation now comes to us, we screen it with the first model, and that's the first gate where after all of that, we do an evaluation or assessment of that and say, this is something that we think we can be involved with, and acting then as your CEO. Now, what we prefer is that's the first gate. If we are not sure, then we do the discovery phase, 4 to 6 weeks of immersing ourselves with the innovators on that process to identify we call it the DCE, the distinct competitive edge. And that's just a real sense-making process. And then there's the second decision gate. And then we do a proof of value. Now, all of that, the proof of value is the actual tangible we produce. We call it a demonstrator. So it might represent a part of the project or the product that could go into the market, but we haven't touched alpha prototype, beta prototyping, and it's all to the TRL levels. Now, the model is, the original model was service provider, where someone comes and said, this is the phase, I want only 20 units, and then I'll take it further. Or what we've seen is, I want 20 units, but will you help me with licensing? Will you help me with registration? Medical products, CE, all of that, documentation. Or they say, look, I want 20 units, excuse me, test it in the market, that's proof of value, excuse me, and then industrialize it, okay, scale it and go for it. But the partnership model is what we say is right from between screening or discovery, those two decision gates is, look, we're really interested in this innovation. We want to be your partner. Now, partnership means we'll do the product development, but at partner rates. And that means essentially at cost. So we can't do it for free. We can't do it so this is now where some of the funding comes in from a seed fund that can at least pay for the discovery and then the proof of value to make you those initial few units of the product. For that, we ask for a certain percentage of shareholding in the company. It's not majority shareholding or nothing like that, but at least so we can maybe sit on the board or at least have a decision. But then that's how our skin in the game. And preferably then, it's in a spin-out where the IP sits. Because our overall aspiration is exits. And also engineer these exits. And that is part of the plan that we are busy with now in this innovation capital model is, again, we ask, what is your desired outcome? And yes, maybe you need to build a business, show proper revenue and for able to exit. And the exit might not be realistic, but we have all these options that we will then engage with. But essentially, to answer your question, it's a partnership model at partner rates, which is then covering our costs, and then the rest of it is our skin in the game. And I think we've mentioned it again, the team. Sometimes we will get in, and this is a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. We have the funding. We have projects where the funding is there. The business concept is already there, the commercial product. We just need a champion. You don't have to pitch. You don't have to build a pitch deck and all of that. So we offer that as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do you have the clicker?
Yes, I do.
I'm going to steal it quickly from you. Danny, thank you so much for your question. And I think as a government, we have engaged with Treasury and so forth. And I sit on the R&D Tax Incentive Committee as well. And what I have learned is government doesn't like exceptions. They don't comply with exceptions. They don't like to make an exception for a specific category. But that said, if you look at this slide, Tsolo is from NRF, which is a science council. I believe that there's another science council. We've got MRC also has one. It is not impossible for our science councils to spin out companies. Is it very difficult? Yes. Should it be made easier? Yes. But what we have done when I had a presentation at the Patent Portfolio the Portfolio Committee for Science, Technology and Innovation. And these are the things that we constantly bring up in all of our responses, because this is something that has to be driven from various Department of Small Business Development, quite frankly DTIC as well. As a unit, we need to see how do we streamline this, because if you make an exception, and this is just as a government item, if you make an exception for a science council, then you'll have the whole SME contingent on you, because why is it now easier for a science council and not for me, and then the universities, and then everyone is just mad at us. But it is something that we realize should happen. What we have found is that if you are setting up if you have to set up a startup company, and it is too difficult because you need your minister's approval and my minister's approval, it is to get that licensing partner, that person that can take it forward for you. To get that right person is very difficult. To get that champion is very difficult if you want to do it on your own. But that is an option to take if it is impossible. What we have seen with our science councils that has got it right, if you do it once, you've almost broken the ice.
Yeah.
The first one is, blood, sweat and tears and more tears and more tears. But as soon as you have been able to do it and actually, hopefully, shown value, then the next ones are... our department is not the one that will be particularly difficult. It's more to convince your minister. But it is something that is there. We are trying now, again, sorry, with the IP and TT survey, to asking that question again, putting it forward again. Because from the previous survey to this survey, we have shown, but it is, if you read all the documentation from government, it is acknowledged that it is too difficult for our SMMEs to break in. We have seen now, even with procurement, there is some slight movement of procuring locally versus that. And it is something that takes a long time. And that's why I would reiterate it everywhere I go. They will be sick of me because as a person working for government, I've realized that you have to knock on that door. And ultimately, when they become irritated with you, it happens with me as well, then you start actioning it. And so I want to say, if you need assistance and you want to set up a company, let's see how we can help you to get that right. Let's see how we can engage with your minister and see what is necessary for submission. Luckily, it's just a submission. And how do we engage with our minister? That will be number one. Number two would be is let's maybe through opportunities that I now might not know of, who can be that person, because it would be a tragedy if you're sitting with products that's there, that can make a difference, that can make money, for you, for your inventor in terms of benefit sharing, and it's sitting on the shelf because we're waiting for some sort of government policy to take effect, which we know, working for government for a long time, it's going to take a long time. So I think let's do it as a dual approach, knowing that we're not that successful with getting that caveats out, and it's understandable as well, even for the tax incentive when we were advocating for SMMEs getting a higher tax R&D tax incentive. The Treasury said no, because what's going to happen is you're going to have an SME start a company. If he's 5-year-old, he's going to dissolve it and start another one so that he can everyone gets those loopholes. And so for that reason, we don't, from what I understand, Treasury and SARS, I cannot speak on their behalf, they try to avoid setting out caveats, and because it's just an opportunity for people to work around it.
Thank you. Cool. Any other questions from the audience? I have a question. I think, just kind of taking a step back and looking at things holistically, And I'm interested to hear like a few different kind of perspectives. But if you're looking at particularly a complex technology where there's a whole lot of moving parts and there's maybe a bunch of regulation, et cetera, what would you say are the kind of most common or the most problematic bottlenecks or challenges that one typically would need to kind of try and navigate? And do you have any advice in terms of maybe how you could preempt that or get other people involved so that you can deal with that? I'm interested to know like what your advice is in terms of that space, and I'd like to start with Maritz.
Yeah, Joanne, I think just looking at our experience and also now recent engagements in the life sciences now, there's the focus on the product or the innovation, and then we add the IP strategy and the regulatory strategy to that, and then then that happens, and we said that needs to happen not in a linear fashion. It's been parallel, and never surprise the regulator, and especially with our experience with the US FDA, with FDA consultants, right from the start, bring all these regulatory bodies, every aspect of your strategy in. Thomas, you highlighted the Venn diagram. That needs to be the lens from the start. That's from our perspective. Start engaging, and it will be. I would say you can't get away from the complexity. It might even add more complexity, but at least you can navigate within that complexity.
Yeah.
That's my top of my head now.
Fantastic, thanks. Mandili, from a seed fund perspective, a tech transfer perspective, I mean, do you see particular challenges or bottlenecks, especially when you are dealing with, I mean, at the universities, would you feel, and obviously you can't speak for all of the universities, but from a regulatory perspective, if you've got a whole lot of different regulatory issues you're having to deal with, like, are the universities empowered? Do they have the resources to be able to deal with that, to provide the support to the entrepreneurs?
Joanna, I don't think that we are empowered to provide that type of support to the entrepreneurs. I do, however, think that we do have access to our attorneys that can help us navigate that on the one end, though we don't use it for that. So at our university, for example, we've got our legal office who's become a lot more involved in the activities of the tech transfer office, and then we've got our patent attorneys. And we sort of use it for only that. We don't go beyond that. So with the example that I provided, we've got, because the startup is that keen and that involved and at an early enough stage, which doesn't often happen, they sort of driving it from their end, and they've got attorneys that they are, and product developers, I guess, as well, that is helping them on that end. So I think, and I think another issue that is not an issue, another instance we find ourselves facing is that we develop at university. It's almost like a siloed approach. We develop at university, and then we don't have industry. And so when we get there, it's like, oh, now we need to comply with what the market requires of us to do.
And that's a fundamental issue. I mean, we see it often where you've got research, they've used particular reagents, particular methods, whatever. We've had a look and it works, and then all of a sudden it needs to be scaled up, and they're kind of almost going back to the drawing board because actually the scale up isn't working. Now you've got to look at a whole lot of other pathways and issues that you then need to look at. From an IP perspective, I mean, I'm thinking about things like IP of other people. Like, what do you see as some of these issues in terms of challenges and bottlenecks?
So from the other end of the table, as it were, I just also want to say scale-up is, it's well known as one of the massive issues. You have this idea that works on the bench top, and when you try and make it bigger, everything just, it's a separate R&D process, effectively. But that little aside done, from our side of the desk, I think there's an internal and external issue that causes bottlenecks. The external issue amongst our clients is it's a timing issue. It's the fact that because you're dealing with 3 domains at once, you're dealing with commercialization, dealing with IP, you're dealing with regulatory, you actually need to tee up everything just so to have it all come off at the right point. I mean, a stupid commonplace example is that the pharmaceutical industry, the way that their regulatory structures work, a patent only lasts until about like 2 years before they get into the market. That's why drug pricing is so weird. That's why the pharmaceutical industry is so strange, because of the constraints on how their regulatory system works. They only get to enjoy that monopoly in the market that the patent normally affords for like 2 years, 3 years. And similarly, I mean, even at a lower level, clients will often, they'll have this issue where they come in, you either come in too early and we sort of have to pen things, and then, but that at least allows us to sort of tee everything up. Or they come in at the point where they actually should have already done something 6 months ago. And then we're kind of rushing to catch up, rushing to get everything sorted. I think having said on that side, there's a little bit of a problem on our side as well, and that's that patent attorneys, we have a legacy of being these sort of hyper specialists. We think about patents first, broader intellectual property second, regulatory compliance distant third, actually enabling you to get your product and everything commercialized way back in the line. That's not what we're good at. And it's something that I think we as an industry, we as practitioners, we need to develop a better sense of how to assist you. And that's where I think you and I we're in a bit of an accord here.
Yeah.
You need to have an approach where you're not just advising client on how can I obtain these rights for you. You're trying to advise them on, okay, what's going to come up in the regulatory space for you so that you're aware of it. What are the important rights here? Because as you said, there's no point getting a patent if what the product needs is a trademark. And we have to be able to bring that up for client first. That's on our side of the thing, there's an internal and external issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, I think it's fundamental to be able to look at the bigger picture as somebody's attorney and not just be looking at the IP. And I mean, even when it comes to being able to sort of, and because we are technical experts, a lot of the time we do have the kind of ability to look into the future. So if we see you've got a lab scale X and you've got these reagents or these processes, you've done a bit of a landscaping search to see what intellectual property is out there, you can engage with them and say, okay, have you looked at whether this is actually going to be commercially licensable? And often the answer is, oh, we haven't thought about that. And then once you've got a patent application filed, you have to continually engage and say, okay, so now we're going through examination, we're having to make amendments. Are these amendments going to be commercially useful for you? Or are you going to end up with a patent that's granted with a bunch of claims that are useless to you because it's either off topic now or it's so narrow that it's actually useless. So it's very important to look at it from a much more holistic, and that's not even getting into, as you say, the regulatory side of things. No, absolutely. Thank you. I'm interested to also hear, like, from your experience dealing with startups and spin-outs, what are the most common mistakes that you see them making? Because I think if you can highlight the mistakes that they keep making, hopefully they'll stop making them.
If I may
Yes,
start
go
with
ahead,
that, we have a separate slide that we show during our discovery process. There's the difference between making the product right or making the right product. And we see so many innovators, it's their darling. And then after the discovery show, but here's the commercial opportunity, not for what you wanted to do. And that's the majority of things that we see. And it can become emotional.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah, and I suppose it takes quite a lot emotionally to admit that it's not going down the right road, and to actually have the ability to pivot.
That's right, and that's part of our selection criteria for these 4 teams is, are you teachable? We have a lot of entrepreneurs or academic innovators that says, this is how I'm going to do it, I decided, then we respectfully say, look, good luck, and it's,
If I can maybe add to, I think one of the mistakes that we see is what Thomas has said, you come too late, and then you expect miracles from us in a day or two. We can't do that, 1. 2, I think what a lot of people, especially the public, and yes, it's definitely government's fault, as seen as not being helpful, not being, there to assist the public. And I think as soon as you are in this field, relationships matter. It's important to have a good relationship with the DTIC key people. It's important to have a relationship with DSBD, because those are the people that you will connect with. And whenever someone comes to me, as I've mentioned, at 11 o'clock, I always go, just don't worry. we'll sort this out. Not now, because I'm going to sleep, but tomorrow morning, we will sort this out. And we are, as government, there to help you and build those relationships with whichever department. If it is the National Treasury or the SARP colleagues, get to know them, help them. Don't come with a problem. Come with a solution as well, please, because constantly coming with problems is tiring. We know we're doing wrong. We know we can do better. But if you come with a solution, that is up. And come early enough, because then we can really help you, as opposed to, the PCT is dying in 3 days and it needs to be assigned over, but you don't actually have the assignment ready. Also, maybe one last point is NIPMO. If you have to come for approval, you don't have the final document ready. We are very happy to look at draft assignment agreements and so forth, with a caveat that you send us the final one and it doesn't have substantial changes. And from what I understand is some of the SARB people are also open to that. So even if it's in draft form, let's run these things parallel. Let's get the approval ready. Let's give you that certainty that you want, but also afford us the time to look at it, because we can do it in 30 days. We will do it in 30 days. We cannot do it in 3 days.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Mandeli, do you have anything to add?
I think one of the issues is that they for startups, they're so focused on funding that they miss a lot of important stuff that are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
They want to raise funding, so they don't pivot, they don't look at other indicators from where they sit. And I think they lose a lot in that.
Yeah,
that's true.
Thomas, do you have anything that you feel?
Aside from, I think in every presentation I give that involves the general public or anyone in universities, aside from the obvious disclosure issue that comes up again and again and again, where people rush to disclose, they rush to publish, and then they sort of think about IP, then they think about patents. Aside from that, I think for startups, the number one thing that I've seen just sink a startup is in that transition between, we've got this bright idea, we've started getting our ducks in a row, and then we run into the process of negotiating agreements, getting another partner on board, and the whole thing just grinds to a halt on a bed of sort of unbalanced expectations that you haven't done all of your homework in terms of getting everything prepped. And I think that's where your SCEG's approach, I think, would be an incredibly good way to bridge the gap on industry side. And also that's where I think that the TTOs, that's the space that they're starting to lean their way towards to help people jump that gap. Because again, that's where a lot of these things die right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I think coming from a commercial law firm, almost predominantly commercial law firm, and doing a lot of due diligence assessments where people are either looking to exit, or there's an acquisition happening, or there's funding that's being sought. The thing that scuppered the deal the fastest was if they weren't prepared. So if they didn't proactively understand what they've got, not just in terms of intellectual property, but have they ticked all the regulatory boxes? Have they looked at, the protection? What is out there in terms of the competitive landscape? All of those things, that intellectual asset management wheel, where we look at all of those different facets and put it in a checklist and make sure that you've got everything, so that when your investor or whoever the person who's wanting to acquire you asks for that information, you can give it to them. That has always been something that, if you don't do that, it's you really are setting yourself up for failure. So for me, that's that. We don't have very much time left, 5 minutes. I thought I'd just do a whip around, and I'd like each of you to maybe just give a take home kind of, if it's the only thing you remember from this session, take this with you, nugget. So would you like to start, Moritz? You can reiterate something you've already said.
No, I think there are a few things that came out, and I had this nice idea, and then, whoa, wait, this is better. We need a success story, and I would say it's increasingly evident that collaboration is part of the strategy. Not just, you've mentioned not just as an IP lawyer, but as IP strategy from the start. You've mentioned that first, or that single, we need one of them to raise, to be on the radar. It's a whole lot of things, but
Thanks, Moritz. Chitani.
I
think my take-home message is this is an ecosystem. You need the lawyers, you need the innovators, you need the jockey, you need the funders. As the department, we have set up an Innovation Bridge portal, which try to bring all of those together. It'll only work if everyone participates in that platform. We've got some good traction. We are about to incorporate, I think it's over, I want to say 100,000 SMMEs onto this portal through the DSPD. So
you can look for collaboration and stuff like that there as well.
Innovators. So if we can have these types of tools where we can see what we have, we can advertise what we have, we can put our services up, hopefully that we can make that circle, in this case actually smaller, because we want to be able to accessible to be that, I want to say specialist, to be that round person that can do everything. Maybe just one last thing is also thanks, Thomas. I realized it was complex, but you opened your eyes. Your practical approach to this has really resonated with me to understand how many people, how many actors there is in a very seemingly simple product. So it's really helped me as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Mandali.
I think for me, it's that the ecosystem is not the innovator and the university. The ecosystem is a lot broader than that, and we don't use enough of it.
Yeah.
So I think that relationships are important. Chetani said that. But we've got a lot at our disposal, and we need to make opportunities available where we share this and discuss this and move this along.
Yeah, thank you. And Thomas?
I'm going to cheat and do two. The first one is just I buried the lead on this, but I think that it's still useful that trying to shift our vision in terms of how we deal with these things from separate individual silos into sort of a holistic approach. It's difficult. You're going to find your eyes facing in different directions. But if you can do that, it makes everything a lot easier. That's the first thing. The other thing that came out in this discussion, which I thought was very interesting, is just how important it seems to be that you need somebody to champion a product, to champion an idea, to champion a business, and to run that. And it seems to me that that's also one of the huge things that we all need to learn how to do better, is that identifying that person, getting them in the place they need to be. And I'm glad that everyone on all the different sides seems to be acknowledging that and working towards that problem.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to finally sort of close. Jatani gave me this fantastic piece of information, which we haven't really touched on, about just kind of entities that you can tap into, whether it be funding or collaboration or support networks that are kind of sometimes facilitated by government, but otherwise sort of externally, that you can kind of tap into. So what I want to do is put together like maybe just a couple of pages, which just sort of outlines those, so that, and then you can take that away. We'll make it available to the virtual attendees as well, because I think it's just really useful to have that information. And obviously, if you have any questions around any of those particular ones, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'll then go and pester Jatani, and we can hopefully give you more information if you need it. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think we are 1 o'clock on the dot. Well done. Thank you very much.